Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be able to welcome you to our Go Tech webinar. My name is Joan Kang Shin, and I'm a professor of education and associate dean for faculty success in the College of Education and Human Development at George Mason University. In addition, I'm also the director of the Global Online Teacher Education Center, or GoTech, at George Mason, which is the host and sponsor for this webinar today. I work with GoTech Associate Directors Jared Bora and Anya Evnanova, and our faculty affiliates to further the mission of GoTech, which is to advance research and pedagogy in online teacher education and professional development around the world that is inclusive, accessible, and culturally and linguistically responsive and sustaining. GoTech's work further strengthens the College of Education and Human Development as a global leader in teacher preparation by exploring innovations in teaching and learning to advance the field of teacher education in online environments. So if you would like to know a little bit more about GoTech, I'm putting the link to our website in the chat box. Please click on it, but then go and read all of the stuff about GoTech later after we have our webinar. So, Jared, would you like to introduce our speaker now?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, John. Really excited for today. I just want to show here's the website. And if you go anywhere on here, check out the resources and scroll down. And hey, Melissa War's webinar, I guess over a year ago. But I was just mentioning to her that I still think about this webinar, and I still use examples that she shared. I'm developing a course on generative AI. Actually, I developed it last year, but I have to redevelop it every few months, it feels like. And Melissa is heavily featured in that course because she has a great website that I'll put the link in just a minute, but just awesome. She has presentations, kind of a running blog here, and also activities. Really like her videos too. She's great at videos. So I would just really encourage you after this, go to the GoTech website, go to melissaward.com and kind of explore those resources because it's just full of great things. And I'm going to stop talking in just a minute, but I'll just say I met Melissa at ISTE 2 years ago, but I knew her kind of virtually, but we met in IRL in Denver, and just really impressed by her work, and we're grateful to have her a second time here with GoTech. And this is culminating her fellowship with GoTech over the last year. So we're really excited. The first fellow was Kurt Bonk a couple years ago, and she's our second. If you have any nominations for or self nominations for GoTech Fellowship, let us know. Reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you more about that. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Melissa. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it is so great to be here. And I hope you don't have too high of expectations, but we'll do the best we
very,
can
very
here.
high, very high.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link here, and I just put it in twice. And this is a little Padlet. And when I interact with things, it's hard for me to just focus on one thing. And I like to have different tasks going on. So if you're bored, tired of listening to me, or you just kind of like doing things while you listen, the only thing that's going to be relevant right now is the first tab. So let me share. Hopefully I can share screen too here. You don't need to see me over the shoulder. Okay, we'll just do this. And I'm going to bring this over here for a minute. So right here, the very first task I have here for you all is to make an inequitable AI picture. And that's a challenge. So the cool thing on Padlet is they have this AI image generator. And the AI image generator is particularly biased. It's worse than a lot of other engines, which makes it nice. So the other day I was playing with this and I said something like, I don't know if it'll do the same thing, but I said, I was trying to describe myself, and I said, a university professor trying to get her two kids, I'm going to put their two kids to school. And I'm just going to see, because the cool thing is it also comes up with multiple images here. And so you can kind of look and see if there's any patterns. Now, okay, this is good. We have woman here. This isn't horrible. It was last time I did it. If I did, I was a university professor, they wore uniforms. And if I did, I was a nurse, they did not wear uniforms. And of course, it changes all the time. But if I just change this over here to a nurse, we're just going to see if there's any differences in what it does. If it changes gender, if it changes what it changes, and just looking at those patterns, because they're just interesting to watch and track. So it looks like, the other one just had one uniform, so it wasn't really a full pattern, but we've got some nice female nurses here. I guess this is like an old-timey school. This is like if you watch Call the Midwife, they wear uniforms like this. So there you go. We've got female nurses. She has boys, and they're off to school. So have fun. If you find something interesting, you can just add that to it. And I'm just going to move on, and we'll come back to it in a little while. But you're welcome to play with that. If you want to take all 4 shots it shows you, you can take a screenshot of the 4 and post it. Or you could just choose one of the pictures it gives you and automatically post it and describe it. So I'm just going to leave that open. And in the meantime, start giving the main part of my presentation over here. And once I find my correct windows. All right. So this is our basic title. The question I'm going to start with is, why am I doing this? One of the reasons is because when I put this in Gamma and I asked it to create a slide with a picture of a person, they put this nice white male here, a little model-like, which doesn't represent me necessarily. And this is the default picture. This is one of the reasons why I'm doing this, is because it's tendency to do this type of thing. And I want to step back just a little bit to the motivation behind like all the different work I'm doing. And I talked about it last year, so I hope it's not too redundant, but a little bit of a twist on it this year. I've started trying to look at bias in AI systems. And this is a newer example. I could give AI a scenario like, I'm going to say I have math students. My math students were asked to write story problems about their daily lives. And I want you to grade those story problems based on the accuracy. But I could slightly change those story problems. So one of them, I could talk about 3 packages of organic quinoa from Whole Foods. And then another student could say, I bought 3 packages of rice at Dollar General. The numbers are the exact same, right? But so the answer should be the same for both of them. But the descriptors are kind of just implicitly different. They're saying these are some things in my daily life where I see math. And so what I do is I created some examples like this, and I did a whole bunch of them. And I asked different large language models to give them a grade and feedback, where the actual accuracy is the exact same in all of them. I had some purposeful errors, but they were exactly the same. The only thing that changed was these markers for different identities. And so I'm curious if it's going to take into consideration these markers when it's grading or giving feedback to the students. And so this original one, this one right here, I did 8 different large language models. And you have to repeat it a lot of times because you have to look at patterns. And when I look at the grading, there wasn't a lot. You see, we have like the dark blue, which is like the Dollar General low SES, and the light blue is the Whole Foods. There isn't a huge difference in grading across these, but there's a huge difference in range of scores and inconsistency. And these all have the exact same numbers. They should have been, I think it was 67% was what they all should have been, because it asked to grade based on accuracy of the numbers. So that's your first clue that something weird is going on, okay? But more than just the numerical scores, which I'm going to move past this one, is the feedback it's giving students. Because we're talking so much about individualized instruction and all this stuff that we want to think about how is it going to adjust its text to personalize for students, right? It now knows students' interests, it knows all kinds of things about the student. How is it going to personalize? And so I do some text analysis, and there's one tool called Clout. And Clout is kind of like the social status you put above someone else. So are you seeing yourself as a leader or authoritative or dominant person over the other person? Or are you more of a peer-to-peer collaborator? And there's certain terms we can use in the way we speak that have been shown to indicate this high or low clout. And so I can take all of the text, feedback text it gives me, and I can run it through this text analysis tool and actually get scores for the levels of clout in the different conditions. And what we actually find out is that it's giving a higher clout to the Dollar General low SES condition, which means it's talking down to them more. Right. And that's, I think, even more concerning than we can just say don't grade with it. But the actual types of text it's using, it's actually talking down to the low SES student in the feedback it's giving them. And this effect size is really large, especially in Claude. It's not just a little difference, it's a huge difference because it's trying to match patterns, right? When we say a model is better, it usually means it's matching its data better. And so it's pulling on those patterns with pretty large effect sizes. One more thing before I get into the main part of this, a lot of time we say, okay, these models are going to get better. And in some ways they have. I think the over grading bias with scores is not as biased anymore. But when we look at these feedback characteristics, this is one where I combined, I looked at one student likes classical music versus one student likes rap music. And I looked if there was a significant difference between how it talked to these different students. And these are the results when I ran it in 2024. And this is the number of significant variables. Now, this is just like a quick stab at this. We're doing a more formal analysis right now, but there's a blog post with more details on this on my website. But this is our quick stab. We can run a whole bunch of text analysis tests, and we can see how many of these are significant. I think I can do that. Then in last February, I redid the exact same test using 2026 models, and we're still working on getting the Gemini because it's having problems. But we have a lot more significant differences in the text, a lot more than we did in the 2024 models. So it's definitely not getting better. Let me just say that. Like it's trying to customize more. I mean, if we look at the actual, let me close this. If we look at the actual part, we have basically a 5 times increase in characteristics that were different, statistically significantly different between the student who likes rap music and the student who likes classical music. So you can see more details of that on my blog. But it is because of these problems that I've been really interested in how people are interacting with AI and how we help in-service and pre-service teachers think and use AI critically and what that means. And so one thing you've probably noticed to know is that, large language models, this kind of simulation isn't great, but it's showing if we have the word city, what are the next most likely words to come? And then it just chooses what the next most likely word is in here. So it's basically taking averages in a way. It's a probability based. It's the next most likely word with some other complications. But this is like a theoretical example of what it's doing. What that means is that overall, our tools are regressing to the mean, and the image got cut out. That's all right. It's going to regress to the average of our biases. It's going to take identities and potentially flatten them. And this is something we've seen with our work with teachers in schools. Their students saying, and that doesn't represent me. That's not who I am. And so in order to avoid this flattening, we have to think carefully about how we are helping people think and use AI. Normally, AI literacy is a lot of prompt engineering. So what you put into it, understanding the basics of it, and those things are important. And then we talk about how we evaluate. And usually we talk about fact checking. And really, it's a lot of times just this green and red category. It got it right or it got it incorrect. And sometimes we say something's incomplete. But by using this model of fact checking, is it right or is it not right? We're missing if it's technically correct, but if it's different for you, or bringing your experience and seeing how your experience might be different than what the AI is saying. And so by just looking at accurate, incorrect, we're kind of perpetuating that flattening. We're just looking at fact checking versus looking at variety and identity and expanding that. And so we've got to think more about critical and reflective thinking. And then the question is how we do this. And I'm going to jump around a teeny bit here. Hopefully it makes sense. One theoretical model I'm kind of building on a little bit has to do with the knowledge we're using when we're using AI, because that's important to think about. What from us are we bringing to bear when we're prompting and interacting with AI? And this is from Punya Mishra. On the Padlet, I actually have a link to this blog, I think, about the expertise paradox. And this is loosely based on his own representation of some empirical research, where they talk about when people have higher domain knowledge when they're using AI, and they have higher understanding of AI, like what it misses, its characteristics, they actually use higher cognitive effort for what it does, which for a long time we said, oh, this is going to have cognitive offloading. It's going to help people do things faster. When people have expertise, it tends to slow them down and be more taxing. It could still have a better product in the end, but the idea that it's going to be able to take over the expertise is not happening right now. And there are very strict empirical studies on that. On the other hand, if you don't have domain knowledge, you don't know how to evaluate the AI. And so you're more likely to just accept it or think this false confidence is like, I think it's right, but I have no idea how to tell if it is or isn't. And so using this to think about what knowledge we're bringing when we're interacting with AI, I think can help us with this critical conversation we're having and the way we're thinking when we're using it. So if you have just AI knowledge, he calls it the generic BS detector. I know something's wrong, but I don't know what. And then just the importance of any domain knowledge, that you need that to build on. And so get down to if we integrate domain knowledge and AI knowledge, it requires more cognitive effort instead of less cognitive effort. So how do we do that? Like, how do we help pre-service and in-service teachers put forth that effort and get in the habits of putting forth that effort, especially when they don't necessarily have a lot of domain knowledge to start with, especially pre-service teachers. And so we're looking at how do we prepare them to sustain critical reflective thinking, and then also how does it interact with knowledge construction? Like what types of knowledge do they need or do they apply to do that? One other small change I'm going to show you here. This just has knowledge of AI. I kind of changed it to critical AI knowledge, which is here, where I'm looking not just understanding its tendencies and limitations, but also having that equity lens and being able to say, you know, who's included, who's left out, whose story is this telling, whose story is it not? And so bringing that type of lens to their work. So ultimately, with all that, hopefully kind of makes sense, is we're looking at three main research questions right now. What forms of knowledge do pre and in-service teachers apply? So if I'm trying to get them to critique, what knowledge are they bringing to that? How do they enact critical AI knowledge, if they do, when evaluating? And then how do we help them increase that? And I have critically and creatively, and I'll get more to that later. These questions have shifted a little bit since I first started this project, but this is kind of what I'm focusing on. The overall methodology here is an educational design research. So what that does is it allows you to develop an intervention, which I'll show you in a minute, and theoretical findings at the same time. So I have some type of intervention that I'm going to do in different iterations. I'm going to do over and over. And I'm going to make little tweaks, just like in a design process, if you've heard of that. And through that, I'm also going to come to understand like a broader understanding and truth underneath it. So theory-wise, I'm looking at these forms of knowledge and how they interact. And then the intervention is a specific task I have students do, which I'll show you in a minute. And then I can look at the results from that task to help inform my theory. So just briefly, this is kind of iteration, you know, I don't need to show all this right now, but we have an iteration 1, and then we make adjustments that go into iteration 2. We have new findings and adjustments that go into the next iteration. And then right now I'm on this third one, and I'll come back to this in a minute to show you. So the intervention itself is trying to get people to think beyond just right and wrong. And so it has to do with color coding AI transcripts and adding annotations and reflections. So right now, I started with these categories. We have the green, yellow, red, where AI got it right, it was incomplete or incorrect. And then context dependent. It may be true for some, but my experience or my context differs. And so it looks something like this. I tell my students, I did it twice. So the first one I said, you choose whatever area of expertise you want, because I want you to see what it feels like to use AI in an area that you do have expertise in. And you're just going to do a simple prompt that says, tell me about this. And you're going to copy that transcript and you're going to color code it with those colors and add little comments like the student has done over here. So they put highlights and then they put little comments to the side. And then there's some reflection questions. And then they write another prompt in response to what they got and additional reflections. The second one, they were specifically focused on something having to do with teaching or pedagogy. So this one is, how should I teach World War II to eighth graders, right? And so same thing, they're highlighting this and adding comments. So this is encouraging them to really evaluate critically what they're getting from the AI, not just what they're prompting, but what they're actually getting, and have these tangential thoughts where they're actually thinking. They're not just kind of skimming through and going on. It also gives me information as to what they're thinking and the comments, annotations they're thinking, and then the reflections they write. And it gives me data to look at for how they do it. A little more about that blue category. The blue is the context dependent, like maybe true for some. Let me give you another example of this one. This one, this person, this was their first one that was just like the generic, like about anything. And it was talking about machinery. I don't even know this stuff. And it said, this is the most critical and expensive part. He's like, well, I've not always found that to be the most expensive part. It is critical and expensive. So they're saying, I can't say this is false, but my own personal experience is different from this. And that matters, right? Your own personal experience matters. And that actually brought out a lot more of experiential knowledge in what they did. So basically, I have my first iteration, it just has to do with when my classes are. My first one was an online 5130, it's an online master's class. It's a recertification class, not recertification, it's an alternate certification class, master's level. And a lot of the students are already practicing teachers. And of course, then I see how many of them will let me use their data for the research. And then the second one was an in-person pre-service teacher class. And they did those two tasks, and I just kind of looked at that data across them. I also had them do like some producing lesson plans and such. I'm not analyzing it in this part. I have some general impressions of that, but I'm going to focus just on these analysis, these critical AI analysis that they did. So from there, I could go and I could look at their comments, I could look at their patterns of colors and code it. And so my basic categories on these codings are what knowledge they applied, student noticing, and how they acted on it. And those categories kind of change as we go, but it kind of gave me insight into what they're thinking and noticing and what they do with the AI as a result. So the first one is just what forms of knowledge. And you might be familiar with this, or add a T to there and you get TPAC. This was originally Schulman pedagogical content knowledge. You can know about teaching, you can know about your content, and then you can know about teaching your content. There was a lot of that in there. And part of it was the generic one had a lot of content knowledge, right? And then the pre-service teachers had a lot of pedagogical knowledge. They would make a lot of comments like, this leaves out visual learners, or this is good for assessment, that they're not disciplinary specific, but they're more general pedagogy because that's where they are in their learning. And the graduate students who are more teachers would have a lot more specific things about, I know when I teach this subject that this doesn't work and this does, or, oh, that would be a good idea because I find my students often make this mistake. So those are the types of knowledge. And then we have this experiential situated knowledge, and that's that blue category. And that's actually saying, look, I have this real world experience that AI can't replicate because it doesn't actually experience the world. It just repeats patterns. And so it's important for me to bring in those experiential pieces of it. And it helps avoid that flattening that we talked about. So like I just said, like these are kind of like the codes here. Undergraduate, they're more commonly applied PK than PCK. Grad students had a lot of PCK there, which was really nice, just in the way they highlighted, they annotated their reflections. They showed a lot of application of that knowledge as they were looking at it. And then all of them had a lot of experiential knowledge. And I don't know if that could have been how I talk about AI with them in my classes. It could have been a result of the blue highlighting. It could just be what people do. I can't really take it apart, but it was really significant to me that they're doing a really good job of thinking about their own lives and their own contexts and what that brings to that evaluation instead of just going with the generic AI. Here's some examples. I don't want to say this doesn't work, that it's not possible, but from watching observations and discussing the classroom with endless obstacles, most districts demand something different. So it's like that's really nice, but in the real world, this is what I observe and this is what happens. And this person teaching the subject before helped me see where I had good suggestions. Because of my real life experience and knowing the group, I am more skeptical to try some of the strategies because I know some will not work. So they're using their actual personal knowledge and not just going off of whatever it tells them. And the other part is like how do they evaluate AI? And that has to do with how they notice if there's errors or omissions, or they say that's right or that's wrong, those green, yellow, red categories. And they were able to do that pretty well. There was a lot of validation. That is, a lot of this is correct, which a lot of time AI is correct, at least on a surface level and factual level. There was a lot of experiential knowledge. And then this knowledge generation. One thing that's important to me in my work is how people come up with new ideas and how they make connections between ideas. And one thing I was noticing is there wasn't much of that happening. And it could have been due to the task was just an analysis, but I wasn't seeing many connections. And that actually led to what I did in my second iteration, where I changed up the categories. So let me kind of move forward to that. So research question 2 is about how they interact with an equity lens. And again, like looking at AI through an equity lens had to be focused on domain. And the depth had to connect to the domain expertise. And so here's some examples. Like this is just a regular pedagogical knowledge. Like it's important they include all students that may learn differently and have different learning needs. That's great. This one from a graduate student, big omission is local knowledge from indigenous traditional agricultural practices. Oh, this is not my PCK one, but I'll have another PCK one in a minute. To acknowledge the common weeds is setting local gardeners up for failure. That's a more general content knowledge, not pedagogical content knowledge, but it's a very specific gardening and traditional agricultural practices that AI left out. So this is more of a pedagogical content knowledge version. Which guided questions would be good to help them analyze primary sources? And this is what they wrote to the AI. Understanding the sources of their legitimate issue is important. Are there multiple first person count? How are they similar? How are they different? And this is the teacher trying to figure out how to get at that equity lens within that historical content area and bringing those together. And so then we get to this increasing critical and creative AI use. And how do we actually get them to increase and carry this over, not just in their assignments that they're doing, but throughout? And I'm going to skip over a little bit. So I mentioned before in the first iteration, that first research question, that I didn't see a lot of them coming up with new ideas or connections or knowledge generation. And so what I did is in my second iteration, it was actually partway through, I added this purple category. And the purple category was something like, it made me think of something new. And so adding that purple category actually increased the number of times I saw this knowledge generation, not necessarily in the purple coloring, but in their reflections. So it started adding into their connections that they're making across knowledge domains. Here's like an example. AI gave me different ideas of how I can use them to teach the difference. I mean, that seems pretty straightforward, but they didn't really have much of this before I added the purple category. This one, having a full view that society was also very agrarian lifestyle, allowed me to ask if children worked on the farm. Why wasn't that included in child labor law reform? So that idea about farming, this person hadn't been thinking about before, even though they knew a lot about child labor laws. and then seeing something talking about farming spark, not just that they worked on the farm, but this question, why wasn't that included in reform? That wasn't what they were asking the AI about, but that brought that thought up. So that it's actually bringing up new ideas and helping them build as a collaborator with AI, which I'm going to go back to this one. A lot of time when students and anyone uses AI, they're they're using a prompt to produce something, right? I want to make a lesson plan. I want to make a picture. And we hope we're evaluating the AI, but we're being reactive versus using as a collaborator where we're actually building expertise and ideas and trying to get a more original insight. And I think that's where there's a lot more power in these tools, especially if we look from an equity lens, because we're bringing in our experiences and expertise, collaborating with the AI to build on that and grow. And so what I was seeing is a lot of the staying with the producer until we start encouraging that development of ideas and saying, look, your knowledge should be integrated in this, and not just the knowledge you already have, but new ideas you're coming up with as a collaborator. So here's a purple example. This reminds me of specific learning programs. So the statement was learners discover instructions as they move through experience. Well, that's going to change things now. And this reminds me of specific learning programs like Duolingo, Code Academy emphasize learning by doing. Users guided through interactive practices and small challenges. And the instructional text helps me to keep going. So this didn't say anything about Duolingo or language learning programs or anything like that. But by reading that, they're thinking about what they know and they're making that connection that they can then use as they go forward and continue to develop whatever they're working on. And so you can see between, so I added the, I always forget this doesn't open. I added the purple thing partway through in my undergraduate class. And so these codes went from like 17% talking about expanding knowledge to 80%. The connection and generative insight finally had students actually seeing that. So that made a pretty big difference to get them to start thinking in a more collaborative mode. All right, so you're probably like, what about prompt engineering? Because, I don't know how many generative AI things you've gone to where they haven't talked about prompt engineering. And I kind of purposely stay away from a little bit because there's so much on it. And I think there's a tendency with prompt engineering to get you in a mindset where I've got to tell it exactly what to do, and then it's going to give me exactly what I want. What happens is I don't think you evaluate what it gave you as critically, because it's a mindset that I can control what it gives. And while I think there's definitely principles of giving it context and things that are really important, I try not to be too technical with it and more talk about experiencing how the words you use impact what it gives you and that type of thing, and how giving it more context can help in different ways. But one thing I noticed is that when I look, they all had to write a follow-up prompt. They were using very specific domain expertise when they were writing those prompts. Like this one, they were responding to the AI. You said took away, but that's not domain specific. Can you replace the words with math vocabulary words? So actually making sure to bring that expertise into that prompt they're responding with. And when I was looking more closely at some of the lesson plans that my students had created with AI, they didn't have a habit of bringing in their expertise into the prompting itself. They kept it just in the analysis. And I'm like, well, you saw the analysis. Why didn't you add that to the prompt? And so I've started teaching more explicitly, talking about what are the words in your expertise that you're bringing in to this prompt engineering as a way to shape the type of conversation you're having, not as a way to fully control the conversation, but to shape what you're doing. And so this is moving into my third iteration, which I'm almost done. Students will finish this week and I'll have data next week. But I noticed that a lot of students, they were applying these critical knowledge domains really well in the activities and annotations, but then when they used it for anything else, it just went out the window and they weren't applying it. And it could have been an effort thing, but I didn't see, they went back to just their normal way of using AI. So I'm doing a lot more of embedding it throughout the course, where my current students, they have done it several times in several activities. They've annotated it's the stuff We've talked more about the prompting and disciplinary language and what knowledge they have that they bring, and just looking at how that changes that. And then to make that equity element more explicit, my class right now has been doing an equitable AI experiment, kind of like the images that I asked you to do here, to see, how that changes their knowledge or mindset they bring when they're annotating these conversations. So that's all over, like, when we're coming into this third iteration, we're trying to make these changes into the design and then looking at that to see how that does it. So here's our 5 framework now. We've got green, yellow, red, blue, and purple. And we're going to try it because it's fun to try. So what I want you to do, now you can actually participate, is go to whatever large language model you want. And we're going to have a deliberately small prompt. So I'm going to go to Gemini. Why not? So ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok, whatever you use. And I want you to think of something you have expertise in. And it can be related to teaching and learning, but it doesn't have to be. And you're just going to tell me about what's a good topic. I'm going to say teaching violin. I don't know. I used to be a violin teacher, so I'm going to put that in. I'm just going to keep it on fast. And I'm going to get a transcript here. And what I'd like you to do is look through that transcript and think about, you can even, if you want to, you can copy the whole thing onto another document and actually highlight the colors. Or you can just look through and think, okay, I would highlight that red. I would highlight that yellow, right? And look specifically for the blue and purple. Sorry, I got to pull over this to get over there. For things that may be true for some or that sparked new thinking. And if you find something in the transcript with your AI that you would think, oh, that might be true for some, but I'm different, or it sparked something new, go ahead. We have categories on the Padlet for what did you highlight blue and why, and what did you add for purple and why. Go ahead and try it. And you can start right now. I'm going to kind of think through this one a little bit out loud. And of course, I'm bringing to this some content expertise and some pedagogical content expertise. Thanks, Jared. So if I'm just reading through this, teaching violin is a journey that balances technical precision with artistic expression. It lacks frets and requires unique physical. Early stages are focused on building a healthy foundation to prevent tension and ensure good intonation. So right here, this is something I might actually highlight blue, because while I think it's good to build a healthy foundation, I also think that when you only focus on that, you miss the students actually enjoying music. And so when I teach, although we do focus on that, we also focus a lot on listening and enjoying the music and understanding it. So this is something I might highlight blue. I might copy over to the Padlet. I'll just do it. Copy over the Padlet. And I'm just going to even just put it in the subject line. And I'm going to just say, teaching enjoyment for music is also critical in the beginning. Let's leave it at that. Okay.
So we're
So
still
that's something
seeing
that unless you
your
were a
Gemini
violin
screen.
teacher, you might not know that, but that is something I could do from my expertise. Does everyone understand what to do? And I'm going to look at some of these other pictures too while we go. All right. Yes, I'm going to go back to the color code here. Hold on, I was going to do that. Maybe if I can get my tabs in the right place. There it is. Get that back to you over here. So accurate, incorrect, and then context dependent and generative. You can also think about what knowledge you brought into it. So for me, this violin one, it was pedagogical content knowledge, but it's also just experience. Seeing students get really bored really early because of over focusing on technique and missing that enjoyment aspect. So that's another knowledge I pulled on when I did that one. I like all these deans and professors that are men. That's something I found a lot. K-12 classroom in 2026. And while you're going, I'm just going to be randomly talking and sharing. So feel free to chime in too. Um, I love, and I'm just going to bring this over for a second. I love this picture that they have like a, oh, I guess maybe that's not a chalkboard. It looks like a chalkboard. But then we have like a traditional desk. I don't understand that picture, but yeah. Oh, Jared. Ah, people in Utah celebrate with parades, fireworks, shows, concerts, family gatherings. Breakfasts are really important. Okay, so I'm from Utah as well. So that is my memories is 24th of July breakfasts. Like the scouts always did them, and that is totally my experience too. That's
And
funny.
green jello. They didn't even mention green jello, which is so
My
important.
goodness.
So I got this idea from a doc student who's here at NAS who was looking at cultural celebrations and how it's described in generative AI. So when I met with her originally, I ended up putting the Pioneer Day or 24th of July in there and had similar experience. So I was thinking about that as you're going through these
Yeah.
categories.
Yeah. And you might see like if you were just looking at data and pictures about 24th of July in Utah, you probably see a lot of things about parades and rodeos and stuff, but it really is the breakfast experience that I can like tangibly connect to more. Like remember what it smelled like when they're cooking the bacon and sausage and
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So
yeah.
I feel too.
No, I totally see that. Like that's totally, what I think of there. That's funny. Let's see if we're getting any more up here. And you're welcome if you have any questions or you want to share anything out loud too. Go ahead and chime in here. Villainized by individuals who don't identify. Oh, nice, Elizabeth. That's a nice equity noticing too. Where it's just different for different people. Oh, good. I'm glad you like Elizabeth. It's been interesting to see because I could also do like word counts and see the different color patterns. And I didn't include that here because I'm still checking them all. But it's interesting to see when students use more of one color than another and how it changes between them. Um, it gives you some insight into what they're thinking. The annotations are really great.
It is a great idea. I mean, we all know we need to do this, but
Mhm.
this is such a helpful framework that we can use that I can guarantee you I'm going to pull into my course this summer that I'm working on right now. So this is great.
It's harder to get them over to that purple. It's harder to get there. But I think it's that lateral creative thinking, I'm trying to get them to bridge that. Sometimes I like to say that AI helps me realize what I don't want because it'll give me something and be like, oh, that's not what I want, which I didn't realize before that wasn't what I want. But so it's content it gives me can actually help me understand, but not in the way that it gave it to me. It's almost
I
an opposite.
I have that same experience when when I design assignments poorly for my students, and then they start submitting them. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's not exactly what I was.
Yeah. Yeah. Elizabeth, yeah, they don't know. And that's one of the reasons I have them start out with something they really do know because you don't notice the same things if you don't have expertise. And I think they like to show off their expertise. And so they'll do these random things on Taylor Swift or like, I don't know. And they'll have so many comments about it. And sometimes I think they're just showing off how much they know about Taylor Swift or whatever. But they catch things that, I definitely would not catch. And I think it gives them insight into if I'm using this for something I don't know very well, I'm probably missing a lot of stuff. Yeah. Helps you understand the character of it too. Another part I didn't have in here is the nuance responses. Like a lot of the graduate students would say, that's right, but it's missing some nuance. It's oversimplified, which only an expert would realize that. That's the only, you know, only way you could really recognize that. Let's see if we have any more coming up. Let's see if I can find a purple one in mine. Okay, this is kind of a low level one, but self-care day. Nice. Comes a clutch. So
If
I
I were to
just put one up.
move self-care day, it would be middle of May after finals.
There you go.
But July is good too.
So I got a comment that allows the instrument to be supported by the collarbone and jaw without the hand having to clutch the neck. And this is just random, but like I never thought of the word clutch. Like I know what they're talking about with what students do, but I never thought of it as clutch. But then it brings in that association that becomes their clutch with how they do things when they're nervous or when they're anxious and things in class and they have a harder thing. They tend to go back to that position, almost like that's their clutch position. So may or may not actually be useful in the grand scheme of things, but I never thought of it that way. Signature songs. Nice. Well, and I don't know what time we're ending, but if anyone has any questions or anything, oh, imbalance of gender. Ah, I like it.
Yeah,
It's just
we're ending
yeah.
it at noon.
Okay. Well, let's keep well, I think Elizabeth said she put these songs here and said, I'm curious about the imbalance in gender for these results. And it makes me want to look more closely at my own playlists. Hmm. Maybe we'll do one more activity since we have time. Let me show you this website. So this is, actually, I can just go to it from the Padlet so you see it. This is equityandai.net. And we're in the process of updating this website. So some of it might be a little weird sometimes, but we have these activities. And we're adding a lot of these. These are primarily written by teachers and things they've done in their classrooms. And they're bringing, we talked about that content knowledge and the importance of that. A lot of time when we're talking about um, either equity issues or technology issues, we forget about content. And so these are all placed, almost all of them, in some type of content area, like language arts, or this one doesn't have a content area, but it's actually veterinary and diagnostics. Let me just tell you about this one right now, and let me show you on my blog post about this. Let me pull it up so I can show you. Um, I don't have too many things on here. I started putting random things I made for my class on here because it is this one. And this comes from, oh, I don't have good pictures. I kind of do. Okay. I was sitting with my 11-year-old in the doctor's office, and she had to do a report And she's like, I'm supposed to do a report on someone named Paula, something or other. And it's about, the Revolutionary War. And so I'm like, well, let's figure out who that is. So I go to ChatGPT and I'm like, my 11-year-old needs to write a report. And it says, like, your child's son is likely referring very likely to Paul Revere. And we had said it was a woman, but like it kept telling me it was Paul Revere, or the one I said women more, it's a woman. It's Abigail Adams, Betsy Ross, Molly Pitcher. There's no Polly. And then she's like, well, I think the last name was something like Copter. And they're like, oh, it's Polly Cooper. And this is a Native American woman who played a significant role in the Revolutionary War. And the whole reason that my 11-year-old was asked to do a report is that they were looking at unsung heroes. And so we had that content area of equity area of unsung heroes in the Revolutionary War. And we were able to talk about, man, like ChatGPT did not bring that up until we sure had a lot of detail. It really admitted it and kind of reinforcing how that's an unsung hero because it's not out there in the data that AI is building on very much. It's there, but it's hard to get to because it's not as prevalent as the others. And that's what we mean by unsung hero. So I was going back to some other things my students had done. And we have a high school veterinarian science teacher, and they talked about two kinds of vets. Like one is like a fancy vet, which is in a high income clinic, and one is like a low income vet that's more like a rural clinic. And so her students had to give cases of different animals, like a cat with pneumonia, and ask for treatment plans. But they did it in different contexts, whether it was the fancy vet or the low income vet. And they did it a whole bunch of times to look at the patterns. And one of them was doing this pneumonia one. And she said, hold on, like it's telling me to give oxygen to the fancy vet, the high income vet, but it never tells me to give oxygen to the low income vet. And she said, aren't you supposed to give oxygen if the cat has pneumonia? And so they're bringing in this content knowledge and noticing this pattern at the same time. And then they had this big equity discussion about, oh, like that is something to think about ethically. If you know someone can't afford something, are you assuming someone can't afford something? Or if you just use AI to do this and it gets up the context of where your vet clinic is and your location or other details, is it going to give you these types of treatment plans instead of being more specific? So those are just kind of, there's some other ones like students were trying to do an Into the Garden. And it was talking, the student said that, this is my example. I was trying to do these pictures. I was asking for a woman in the garden, and this was what it usually gave. And when I said a Hispanic woman, it always changed to vegetables. So we went from flowers to vegetables every time. But there's a whole bunch of different activities on here, and one that I actually don't think we have on here. We were just saying we needed to make sure it gets on here. Is called the Global World Tour, and so I'm gonna do it in ChatGPT, sure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a story. So she did this with her special education. Yeah, I know, Lindsay. She did it with her special education class and said, recreate the story of the three little pigs in India. Okay. Create an image of it. I don't know. It was better than that. But this class we're in New Mexico, but their teacher is actually from India. So they have like a class in India that they talk with a lot and they video call. So they know quite a bit about India in the context. And so she was curious. They were actually talking about setting. So they said, okay, let's say it's in India. Okay, now let's say it's in this place. Let's say it's on the moon. And they were learning about setting, but they were also creating these pictures and looking at them. And this is where setting the scene, it's very suspenseful here. Hopefully it's coming up. Finishing up. Hopefully it's actually finishing up. And I don't know exactly what's going to do here. If it's going to do what it did to her students. It changes every week, it seems like. The final touches are taking a while. Oh, and now we're in last week. Okay, it's trying to make sure we stay here. It's like the loading bars that get to 99% and then just stay at the 99% for a really long time.
I love this idea. So you have students Just change the setting, the country.
Yeah, you just change the setting,
Yeah, that's a great
and
idea.
it's able. I mean, there's a lot of intricacies, a lot of things you can discuss, like content wise, like setting. How does that change the characters? How does it change the story if we change the setting? But at the same time, if this will ever load,
But even in text, right? You could do this in text and then
yeah,
see how
yes,
the
yes,
descriptions.
yeah, you can
That's
do it
really
text too.
great. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and basically what it did is it showed like I think I reproduced that somewhere. I don't know where it is. Like in like Sari's in this like barren landscape, and they're like, wait, or it had like a hut, and you're like, did you live in a hut? Yeah, it had like more huts and stuff. Which
Mhm.
this is a little more Three Pigs related. She's got Sari on there. But they asked their teacher, they're like, wait, Miss Edwina, did you live in a hut? I thought there were cities in India. I thought the students lived in an apartment. And we're able to talk about stereotypes and what that means. And that we can talk about traditional Indian village from our perspective, but we can also, what is it really like? And what is really different in that setting that's not just what AI is saying stereotypically. And so it just provides a lot of different ways to explore things like that. So we are going to be putting up a lot more of these, and we're changing the format that we're putting these in. The main character one's good too. So right now the format's not great, mostly just explaining it, but we're reformatting all of these right now, working on it. Um, so this one is like write a short story about a brave kid who saves the day. And then you talk who's the main character, what do they look like, where are they from? And then they change about a brave Somali girl who saves the day, and just comparing and change what changes. And it does show you some prompt engineering a little bit
Mhm.
too, and how your prompt impacts what you get. Um, but it just allows for really thinking about multiple issues at once and having that conversation around them. So
So
stay
many great
tuned. In the
activities on
next
that
couple weeks,
website.
we'll have a
Yeah.
lot more on here. So
Yeah. Thank you so much, Melissa.
yeah.
Fantastic. My notes would be covered in purple from this session. Like so many takeaways from this. So thank you. And what a great dovetail from your presentation last year. If anyone wants to go watch that, kind of an overall picture, and then diving into like these specific activities was really helpful, because we were always talking about this, but how do you do it? And you gave us some really good examples of how we could do that and how we could adapt it for our own context too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so good luck on collecting the data. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for attending, and be on the lookout for future webinars too. Appreciate your attendance and participation.